Have you ever woken up to the suffocating feeling that you aren't alone? That silent, foreboding stillness, the kind that seems to echo with unseen eyes watching you. That's the terror that found me one December night, a horror I'll never forget. My story began innocently enough. I was newly single after a 2-year relationship had ended, trying to navigate life alone. Living in a quiet corner townhouse, the solitude I once craved had become unbearable. To distract myself, I did what most do these days. I turned to dating apps. Swipe after swipe, it felt like a never-ending carousel of superficial connections. Then I matched with Tracy. She was stunning in her photos, bright eyes, long dark hair, and a confident smile. Our initial conversations were light, nothing too deep. She gave me her Snapchat, but our exchanges fizzled quickly, relegating her to the category of people who just watch your stories without ever engaging. I didn't think much of it until weeks later, when she commented on one of my Christmas-themed snaps. It was a simple message. "I love Christmas. We should do something festive together." It caught me off guard but intrigued me. I was eager for company, so I suggested ice skating or visiting a holiday village to see the decorations. But Tracy had a different idea. "How about we decorate your Christmas tree?" she said. It sounded cozy, so I agreed. My artificial tree was still tucked away in the attic, and I told her it would be a 2-person job to get it down. She eagerly offered to help. The plan was set for 9 o'clock that night. Excitement mingled with nervousness as I prepped the house. I vacuumed, swept, and even rushed out to the liquor store to grab a couple of bottles of wine. By 9 o'clock, the house was spotless, the ambiance was perfect, and I was sitting on the couch pretending to casually watch TV while glancing at my phone every few minutes. By 9:30, I started to wonder if she was going to flake. Then came her message, "I'm outside." When I opened the door, my stomach dropped. Tracy was taller than I had imagined, at least 6 feet tall compared to my 5'10". Her overpowering perfume hit me like a wall, almost masking a faint, sour odor beneath. She was attractive, but something felt off. Her face seemed older, weathered in a way that didn't match the vibrancy of her photos. But I pushed the unease aside, chalking it up to first meeting jitters. She sat close to me on the couch, her leg pressing against mine. I offered her a glass of Merlot, and we made small talk. But as the minutes ticked by, the conversation felt strained. Her social cues seemed just a little off, her laugh too loud at times, her gaze lingering just a second too long. Then, as if to cement the awkwardness, she spilled wine on my light blue couch. I forced a smile, reassuring her it was fine as I rushed to clean it up. Inside, I was fuming. The tension in the room grew thicker. To break it, I suggested we start setting up the tree. Getting the tree from the attic was no small task. I handed her pieces of it, each one heavier than the last. When I passed her the largest section, she grabbed it effortlessly, her strength surprising me. Once the tree was downstairs, we began assembling it in the living room. I poured her another glass of wine, hoping to ease the lingering tension. But something was gnawing at me. Her presence felt overwhelming, almost intrusive. I couldn't shake the unease creeping up my spine. To distract myself, I focused on decorating. The ornaments were stored in the crawl space, so I excused myself to fetch them. That's when things took a darker turn. As I lugged the first bin of ornaments upstairs, I noticed Tracy wasn't in the living room. I called her name, my voice echoing through the house. No answer. The bathroom was empty. Both bedrooms were empty. She was gone. Puzzled, I checked my phone. She hadn't opened my last snap message. Confusion morphed into a gnawing sense of rejection. Had she just left? Without a word. Frustrated, I crashed onto the couch. The night's events swirled in my head as exhaustion weighed me down. My eyelids grew heavy, and soon the world around me faded into black. I woke to suffocating darkness. The TV was off. The house was eerily silent, the kind of silence that amplifies every creak and groan. Something felt wrong. My limbs were sluggish, my head foggy, as if I'd been drugged. Then I saw it. The faint glow of my phone's screen illuminated the outline of a figure standing in front of me. Tall, unmoving, my breath caught in my throat. Fear rooted me to the couch, my body refusing to respond. "Tracy?" I managed to croak, my voice barely above a whisper. No response. The figure remained still. Summoning what little strength I had, I picked up my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam revealed Tracy, standing just a few feet away. Her face was blank, her eyes unblinking, staring down at me. Panic surged through me, but my body wouldn't cooperate. All I could do was mumble her name again. She didn't respond. Instead, she turned and bolted down the stairs, her footsteps thunderous. A moment later, I heard the front door slam. Gradually, my strength returned. My head cleared, and I stumbled through the house, my heart racing. Tracy was gone. I checked my phone. Her Snapchat account had vanished. She'd blocked me. I did a frantic inventory of my belongings. At first, nothing seemed missing. Then I noticed the pills. Every bottle of medication, from vitamins to Adderall to the oxycodone I'd been prescribed after surgery, was gone. Even a bottle of vodka from my mini-fridge had disappeared. Realization hit me like a freight train. She hadn't come here for a date. She'd come to rob me. I called the police, providing them with what little information I had. They knocked on my neighbor's door, questioning if they'd seen or heard anything unusual. They hadn't. Tracy, if that was even her real name, had disappeared into the night. Looking back, the signs were there. The overpowering perfume masking an unwashed body. Her peculiar behavior. Her insistence on coming to my house instead of meeting somewhere public. I'm certain she wasn't the person she claimed to be. My theory? She was older, likely homeless, and battling a drug addiction. She'd laced my wine, rendering me defenseless, and then scoured my house for anything of value. The most haunting part of that night wasn't the theft. It was waking up to see her silhouette, standing silently over me in the dark. A grotesque blend of fear and helplessness that I wouldn't wish on anyone. That Christmas, my tree remained undecorated. The joy of the season was overshadowed by the chilling memory of Tracy, a stranger who turned my quiet solitude into a living nightmare. It was Christmas Eve, 1997, and the snow fell in soft, whispering flakes, painting the streets in a blanket of white. But for us, it was just another night. You see, we're Jewish. Christmas wasn't a holiday we celebrated, just a quiet evening like any other. The lights outside twinkled in a festive glow, but inside our home there was no tree, no stockings hung by the fireplace. It was just my little sister and me sitting in front of the TV, trying to distract ourselves from the darkness creeping in. My dad, a doctor, was at the hospital, working on call. He always did during the Christmas holidays. It's just what he did. Technically, our mom was home, but that night she wasn't present in any real sense. She was passed out on the couch like she often was by evening's end. Back then, I didn't understand why. I didn't know what it meant to be an alcoholic. All I knew was that whenever the sun set, my mom faded into a deep sleep and we were left alone to fend for ourselves. My sister and I were downstairs watching some boring TV show when we heard it. Knock, knock, knock. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe a neighbor had come to drop off a plate of cookies or something, but then it came again, louder this time. Knock, knock, knock. I was the oldest, so it fell on me to answer the door. Our front door had glass panes built into it, which made it easy to see who was on the other side. As I approached, I saw a man standing there, dressed in a red Santa suit holding a bag. My heart skipped a beat. Why would a man dressed as Santa be at our house? We didn't celebrate Christmas. We didn't even have a tree. The man saw me through the glass and smiled, his teeth flashing bright white in the dim light. "Hey kid," he said, his voice cheerful. "It's me, Santa. Come on, open the door. I've got your presents." I remember standing there for a moment, unsure of how to react. Santa? On Christmas Eve? Coming to a Jewish home? I wasn't a naive child. I knew better. "Santa isn't real," I said, my voice flat, unmoved by his charade. "And if he was, he doesn't give Jews presents." The man's smile faltered for just a moment before it returned, forced and stiff. "Of course I'm real. I used to only visit Christian homes, but this year I felt bad that Jewish kids never get presents. So I changed the rules. This year I'm making an exception for you." I stared at him, my eyes narrowing. It didn't make any sense. He sounded like a madman, a desperate man clinging to an idea that was completely out of place. "No," I said firmly. "Jews get presents. We just get them during Hanukkah. Not Christmas." His smile dropped completely. In an instant, the jolly festive aura faded, replaced by something far darker. His voice grew cold, demanding, "Open the door now, let me in." I could feel my pulse quicken, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. Something was wrong. This wasn't Santa. This wasn't even close. "Dial 911, I whispered urgently to my sister. She was only 4, but I hoped she understood. As I stepped back from the door, I heard her fumbling with the phone in the other room. The man saw this and his face twisted with frustration. "You really think the cops are coming?" he sneered. "You better let me in or else you're going to be in big trouble." That's when I knew we were in danger. The phone call to 911 didn't go as planned. I heard the operator on the other end, but she couldn't understand us, not really. She probably thought we were just excited kids hoping for some last-minute holiday magic. "This line is for emergencies only," she said coldly before hanging up. I looked at my sister, panic rising in my chest. My mom was unconscious, completely unreachable. Dad was at the hospital and there was no way to contact him. We were on our own. Then it came again, the knock. Knock, knock, knock. I felt my stomach churn. This time I didn't hesitate. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed a handful of candles. Our menorah was on the table nearby, and I quickly lit every single one. Then, in a desperate attempt to get some help, I blew out the candles and tossed them into the smoke detector. It was the only thing I could think of. If the smoke alarm went off, it would automatically call 911. I hoped it would be enough. In my 7-year-old mind, this was our only chance. The smoke detector went off with a shrill, terrifying wail. I ran to my sister and told her to stay inside. The man, still at the door, was shouting something, but I didn't care. Help was on the way. The fire trucks arrived less than 2 minutes later. I was shaking, my heart hammering in my chest. I tried to comfort my sister, but the sound of the fire engines was deafening. I thought we were safe. But then, the man did something that made my blood run cold. He ran straight for the firefighters, calling out, his voice loud and false. "I'm their father. I'm here to surprise my kids for Christmas. I was dressed as Santa. My suit doesn't have any pockets, so I couldn't get my keys. Please, you have to break the door down to save them from the fire." I couldn't believe my ears. The firefighters hesitated for a moment, and I saw one of them step forward. But I knew something wasn't right. I shouted out, "That's not our dad. That's not him." The firefighters paused, looking confused. "Please," I begged, tears streaming down my face. "Our dad's at the hospital. This man isn't him. He's not Santa. We don't even celebrate Christmas." One of the firefighters looked closely at my kippah, the traditional Jewish head covering on my head. Slowly, he began to understand. I explained everything. The phone call, the knock at the door, my desperate attempt to get help. It all came out in a rush of fear and tears. The firefighter finally spoke to the man, his voice firm. Why would Santa be visiting a Jewish home? The man stuttered, his face twitching as he tried to explain, but it was too late. 2 firefighters stepped forward, taking him by the arms, wrestling him to the ground. The 3rd firefighter called the police, asking about the hospital where my dad worked. When the police arrived, they arrested the man without hesitation. They even checked the hospital where my dad worked and informed him of what had happened. My dad came home a short while later, furious with our mum for being unconscious during the whole ordeal. But above all, he was relieved that we were okay. He hugged us tightly, as if he never wanted to let go. That Christmas, we didn't have a tree or presents, but we had something more important: safety. That was a Christmas I would never forget. Looking back now, I truly believe being Jewish saved our lives that night. Had we opened the door to let Santa in, who knows what would have happened? It's a thought that still haunts me. It was supposed to be a relaxing holiday getaway, a cozy retreat to the Poconos, tucked away in the woods, far from the hustle and bustle of the city. But what was meant to be a peaceful escape soon became a nightmare that we couldn't wake up from. It was December 2022, and my girlfriend Charlotte and I were excited for our little winter adventure. We had rented a charming, festive Airbnb, decked out with Christmas decorations. Nestled in the woods, the property offered a beautiful view, and there was even a quaint village nearby that made everything feel more magical. The snowstorm coming that night only added to the charm. It would be perfect, we thought. We'd leave a little early, stock up on groceries, and get everything set up at the house before the storm hit. The 4-hour drive from the city to the Poconos was smooth. We made a quick stop at a Family Dollar for some snacks, then headed straight for the Airbnb. As we turned off the main road, the gravel path through the trees led us to the house, shrouded in an eerie yet inviting quiet. It was surrounded by towering pines with Christmas lights twinkling like stars. There were light-up reindeer, a big snowman, and candy canes lining the walkway to the front door. The house itself was picture-perfect, just like in the photos. A big deck with a hot tub awaited us, and I imagined relaxing there while snowflakes fell softly around us. Inside, the warmth enveloped us like a hug, and the smell of wood and pine filled the air, exactly as we'd hoped. A Christmas tree stood proudly in one corner, stockings hung on the walls, and smaller decorations were scattered throughout, giving the house a cozy, welcoming feel. The fireplace in the living room added an extra layer of comfort, with a stack of logs next to it. We settled in quickly, unpacking our things in one of the 3 bedrooms, though we only planned to use one. I poked around the house, checking the fridge, flipping through TV channels, and gazing out the windows at the surrounding woods. There was an upstairs loft with a pool table and some couches and a basement that seemed to stretch far beneath the house. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to explore the basement. It was colder down there, the air damp and heavy. The basement had no cozy touches like the rest of the house. It felt more like a forgotten space, dark, cold, and lifeless. But before I could linger too long, a knock at the front door interrupted my thoughts. I rushed to answer it, thinking it was the host, Mike, or perhaps a neighbor. When I opened the door, I was met with a man in his late 40s, wearing a ripped yellow-brown jacket and gray sweatpants. He had a friendly smile, but something about his presence unsettled me. "How are you folks doing?" he asked. I replied with a smile, introducing myself and asking if he was the Airbnb host. He said he ran the place with his brother and that he lived just up the road. He mentioned if we needed anything, we could let him know. I thanked him and closed the door. It struck me as odd that he referred to my girlfriend Charlotte without even meeting her. Sure, I'd spoken to Mike earlier about coming up with my girlfriend for a Christmas getaway, but Charlotte hadn't even opened the door. Maybe Mike had told him about us, but still, something felt off. It was pitch black outside by now, and the snowstorm had begun in earnest. We cranked up the heat inside and started preparing our dinner. Simple comfort food, just what we needed after a long drive. Chicken thighs, broccoli, potatoes, and cornbread. We ate on the couch, the glow of the Christmas tree casting a warm, peaceful light over the room as we watched the Polar Express. Christmas was our favorite time of year, and everything felt just as perfect as we'd hoped. After the movie, we decided to take a dip in the hot tub on the deck. The snow had started falling heavily, and the world around us seemed to vanish beneath a blanket of white. I turned on the lights outside, creating a warm, festive glow around us. As we relaxed in the hot tub, the cold night air mixed with the warmth of the water, and we couldn't help but feel like we were in our own little winter wonderland. But then, everything changed. The bubbles from the hot tub suddenly stopped. Everything went silent. Charlotte and I exchanged a look, both of us sensing something wasn't right. Then came the unmistakable sound of footsteps, heavy and deliberate, somewhere on the property. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I asked Charlotte if I should shout out to see who it was, but she whispered, "No." The footsteps grew fainter, moving away from us, until they disappeared into the distance. I tried to brush it off, telling Charlotte it was probably just a deer or an animal, but deep down I knew those footsteps weren't from any animal. They were from a person. We finished up in the hot tub, though the uneasy feeling lingered. After a quick shower, we climbed into bed, trying to shake off the strange encounter. But then, in the middle of the night, it happened again. Bang, 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 loud, aggressive knocks on the front door. My body went cold with fear. Charlotte, shaken, gripped my arm, whispering for me to stay in bed and not make a sound. I wanted to check who it was, but something in my gut told me not to. The knocks came again, 3 sets of furious bangs before finally stopping. We sat in the silence, wide awake, hearts racing. After what felt like an eternity, I got up to lock the bedroom door for added security, but I was terrified. Who would knock on our door at this hour in the middle of a snowstorm? We sat there in the dark, whispering to each other, too scared to sleep. Eventually, we mustered the courage to lie back down, but sleep never came easy that night. In the morning, I texted Mike. He responded quickly, confused about the knocks. He said it was strange and that we should alert the authorities if anything like that happened again. He was right, but his response wasn't comforting. What was there to do? We were alone, isolated in a remote house in the middle of a snowstorm. The next morning, the snow had continued to fall. There was a thick blanket of white covering everything. I went outside to clear the snow off my Jeep, and that's when I saw them, footprints in the snow. They led from the edge of the property and circled the house, almost like they had been watching us. I couldn't understand how this was possible. Any footprints from the night before should have been covered by now. But these looked fresh. Just then, I heard footsteps approaching. Tom, the man who had greeted us earlier, walked around the corner of my car, his face still that same unnerving smile. I mentioned the hot water issue, and he confirmed he was here to check on it. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I told him about the strange knocks and showed him the footprints. He dismissed it all, saying there were strange folk who wandered around at night, but that we didn't need to worry. The words felt hollow, and I began to get a bad feeling about Tom. He was odd, to say the least. I texted Mike again. This time something in his reply caught my breath. Is Tom the name of the plumber? No, I told him. Tom was his brother, the one who greeted us. Mike's next message sent chills down my spine. I don't have a brother named Tom. My heart dropped. I hurried to Charlotte and told her we needed to leave. Now. We grabbed our things, throwing everything into the car in a frantic rush. I glanced into the rearview mirror as I started the Jeep and saw Tom walking quickly toward us from behind. My foot slammed on the gas pedal and I drove as fast as I could, not looking back. Once we were on the road, we called Mike, explaining everything. He didn't stay on the line long, but 20 minutes later, he called us back. The police had arrived at the house, but couldn't find anyone inside. Mike was on his way to the property too. But what disturbed me the most was that the man who had been watching us from the moment we arrived, who had been knocking at our door in the dead of night, was still out there. We didn't stay in the area much longer. We drove around for a while, trying to calm down after the terrifying experience. By the time we reached home, the fear hadn't gone away. Mike sent me a final message that night, apologizing for everything. He claimed he had no idea who Tom was. But what troubled me most was that Tom had been watching us all along, probably from the moment we arrived. He had been there while we were in the hot tub, and maybe he was the one knocking on our door in the middle of the night. We never found out his true intentions. But whatever they were, I'm glad we left when we did, because there's a good chance we wouldn't have gotten out of there alive.